Welcome to Serenity Speaks, Conversations on Wellness, the podcast where we explore the many paths to well-being and how we can create a healthier, more connected world. In today's episode, we're joined by Paul Fox, the CEO of the Yoga in Healthcare Alliance. The Yoga in Healthcare Alliance is transforming lives through the power of yoga. So here's introducing Paul Fox.
Well, I began my yoga journey, Cleo, in August 1995 when I was reluctantly dragged along to a yoga festival at the Yoga for Health Foundation, which at that time was the only residential yoga centre in the UK which specialised in meeting the needs of people with chronic illnesses. So it was particularly good, had a particular specialism in people with MS, people with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic rheumatoid arthritis. And they also did some yoga for people either with or recovering from cancer. And so my first experience was very much sort of therapeutic and using yoga for health. And they had a wonderful English manor house in the Bedfordshire countryside where they could accommodate around 40 guests and wonderful gardens. But every August used to run a 10-day yoga festival. And when I went, my daughters were 5 and 3, and we met another yoga teacher who had twin girls who had been born a day after our eldest, and really that it never stopped going. So I got really inspired by that first 10-day immersion, which was a real almost like shock therapy, because it wasn't just yoga, it was all sorts of different healing and color therapy and crystals, and it was all the unicorns and rainbows side of yoga as well. So as someone who's a pretty straight-laced man there into sort of football and at that time quite a hard-nosed BBC Radio 4 journalist and a bit of TV, 1 and 6 o'clock news as well, to then sort of be plunged into this completely different environment. But I kind of must have made that choice at the time to sort of dive in and explore, and I got hooked in, particularly by their main tutor for that festival, which was a guy called Yogi Harry, who was a Shivananda trained yoga teacher. So his heritage was Indian, but he'd grown up in the Indian community in Guyana, and he'd come across his guru while being a land surveyor designing golf courses in the Caribbean. So a bit like me, he sort of came to yoga a little bit, so I didn't start yoga till I was 33. So yeah, that's how I got into it. And really what I do now, it's been a very long journey, because I spent 10 years doing a lot of Ashtanga yoga, primary series.
Wow.
Going to Mysore and practicing, with great discipline 6 days a week with my teacher, John Scott, and at the time, his then wife, Lucy Crawford Scott. And, that had an amazing transformational effect on my body. And so it was good in that way and gave me a lot of strength. But the day after all the abuse allegations came out, not allegations, the abuse of Tabi Joyce, and I know we might get into this a little bit later, but I'll just mention it in my sort of introductory remarks. I just couldn't practice that anymore. I just had to step away. So I'm not someone who can say is willing to say, well, it's the teachings, not the teacher, because every time I stood on the mat to do my primary series and do the Ashtanga Yoga chant, it was me, John Scott, Tabi Joyce, Krishnamacharya, who was his teacher. That was my lineage in the yoga tradition. So I had to I abandoned that. And I think it was probably time anyway. I'm 62 now, and I've been doing probably the Ashtanga yoga from about 42 to 52, 40 to 52, something like that. And had a very enjoyable experience of time going backwards, sort of feeling younger, stronger, more flexible during a
Yeah,
period when some people feel the opposite.
yeah.
But you can't keep doing strong physical practice as you get older. And my heart was always drawn back to my roots at the Yoga for Health Foundation and using health yoga to support people's health.
Mm.
So yeah, if you've sort of looked at my backstory, I've always been very keen on standards as well, and having well-trained yoga teachers with yoga teacher educators who are suitably qualified,
Yeah,
and purely in terms of them having the skills and the knowledge to be really good yoga teachers and to have that essential anatomy and physiology knowledge and knowledge of how to safely adjust practice to meet the needs of the people in front of them. Whereas
yeah,
too many systems in the past and probably still going on are teaching kind of this is our sequence and it's one size fits all, which we know never works. Over in Wales, there's a wonderful yoga teacher, Mary Madavi, and during lockdown, she supported a lot of people with disabilities with yoga, and
mm,
did such amazing work that she was given a Welsh Hero Award, and I believe her portrait hangs in the National Gallery of Wales as a result of that. And
right.
Mary has a saying, if you can breathe, you can do yoga.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's that and that is the level of accessibility. So in my own teaching, whether it's for the Yoga in Healthcare Alliance or just my own community classes, I always welcome people um, of any physical ability. So
mm,
I will always offer chair and mat options as a teacher. It may be that I have a class and there's nobody there who needs to do it in a chair or hasn't turned up in a wheelchair, and so
mm,
okay, that's fine. But if I feel if I don't say that is how I teach chair and mat, everybody is welcome, then I'm already closing down a door. And I would never book a venue that wasn't accessible. I'd never book an upstairs venue with no lift, things like that. So inclusion, diversity standards, these are the things that I've tried to champion in my yoga life, particularly over the last 10 to 15 years. Yeah, and that inclusion, cuts across so many different aspects of yoga, doesn't it? I mean, when we look at yoga today in the UK, it's still very female dominated. Around 83% of people attending yoga class are female. So, men have been thin on the ground.
yeah,
But it gets better, and in certain particular forms of hatha yoga,
mm,
tending to relate a little bit more to strength and things like that, that men can maybe identify with more, have been successful in attracting more men. And that's such an interesting an interesting conundrum. And because if we look back in the yoga tradition, we see the opposite.
yes, exactly. I was just going to say, yeah,
We
it's so
see
true.
yoga coming from ashrams through a very male-dominated lineage. We have stories like Indra Devi, who's now passed, so a Russian princess coming to India and being entertained by the Maharaja of Mysore, whose yoga teacher is Krishnamacharya, the great, sort of probably the most influential person in the modern yoga tradition, because he taught Patabi Joyce, Iyengar, and his son Deskachar created Vini Yoga. So
Mm,
Krishnamacharya is right up there, and Krishnamacharya being told that he had to teach Indra Devi. It wasn't called Indra Devi at that time. That was her kind of spiritual name later. Teach her yoga because she was interested in it, but he never taught women, and he didn't want to. So he just kept leaving her waiting outside the studio, hoping that she would give up. And she kept turning up day after day until he admitted her. She was a good student, and he, as a result of that, decided that yoga should be for everyone and began to teach women as well as men. So the breaking down of the barriers and the shift is been there in the tradition. But
Mm.
when yoga made it to these shores, it just happened to be picked up and popularized by the Women's League of Health and Beauty, particularly in the 1920s, 1930s, and
Mm.
lots of newspaper and magazine articles from the time. You can tell I'm very much interested in history. My father
Yeah.
was an
So,
Oxford historian, so I read a lot of history books and studied the yoga tradition. So
mm.
when it was introduced here, and the newspaper articles were written, and it was all written in a very feminine way. So it was, do yoga. Mothers look younger than daughters. It will give you beauty. It was all stressing the beauty and these kind
Mm.
of things. And so women began to do it, and it just became sort of culturally perceived as being a practice that women would mainly do. The reverse of what had
Yeah.
happened in
How
India.
it
So
started.
very, very odd.
Yeah, yeah. Because it was I heard somebody say, this was a few years ago, that, they were trying to, their idea was to make, it was a yoga teacher, to make yoga more accessible. And she'd written something that said, people assume that yoga is for uh, blonde, thin women who are very flexible. And I remember thinking, well, no, because the first picture in my mind is of an Indian man, in the orange kind of loincloth type of,
Yeah.
sitting on the floor, very flexible, very thin. But yeah, that was my picture. But
Maybe sitting in the forest or outside a cave with unkempt hair. Yeah. The
yeah,
old rishis. This is the sort of Upanishadic view of spiritual progress. Yeah. Interesting.
and I suppose it's that thing of who brings yoga to your attention, or whether you've seen it in the media or somebody that gives you that perception or idea of what yoga is. And it's only when you explore, because I only looked
Mm.
into the spiritual side of things and a bit deeper once I started my yoga teacher training. Um, but yeah, some of those things, I'm like, I love that story about the lady waiting outside and being so determined, because I suppose that's.
Yeah, I think these are, she was a pioneer, and then
Mm.
she took it off to Hollywood and got, the original celebrity yogis with some of the Hollywood greats from the 30s and 40s,
Yeah,
who were learning from Indra Devi. So
yeah,
yeah, and then we had to wait a long time before some people like Paul Simon and Madonna and Sting came along and really kicked off the yoga boom in the 80s. Um, yeah, yeah, very
yeah,
good.
yeah, it's
Yeah, I
fascinating.
think just on that point, I mean, it's my mission to break down obstacles and barriers that prevent everybody benefiting from yoga. So when I was chair of the British Wheel of Yoga, I mean, I was, as having been in that organisation for a long time, I was very aware that it was a mainly female,
Mm.
overwhelmingly white, and aging membership,
Oh.
and I suspect it still is.
Mm.
So when I became chair, I got those figures audited, and we were way down in terms of representing. If you think about, the least we should expect, if you're a yoga teacher,
Mm.
wherever you live will have a demographic profile that you can look up in census data, and you would know, what the kind of composition of the different communities and heritages are going on in your community. And then you could look at the people who are coming to your class, and you could say, I'm representing my community, or I'm not representing my community. And if you're not representing your community, you need to do something about that. And often that means thinking out of the box and taking positive action and steps and connecting with people who you currently have no
Mm.
dialogue with. So and this is a learning curve for me, because I looked at that, and we're way down on people from the Black community. We were
Mm.
way down from people from Asian community, including Indian, community, which is for a practice that has come from
Yeah.
India, it was doubly shocking. So, we started off, I pioneered a scheme where we provided £500 towards teach training, but yeah, I think we got two people to take that up. So it was I had to go outside the organization and find Dr. Stacey Graham, who's written the book Yoga Resistance, is a hugely, in my opinion, hugely important and influential woman in yoga. She's based in London, actually. Got a lot of got family in the States, so she's held US citizenship, maybe German as well. So she was doing some great work running retreats for Black women to help them find their voice and power in yoga. So I teamed up with her and another Black yoga teacher, Jazz Mullings Lambert, and we ran the first women of color yoga teach training. And we did that, and we put around 20 people through that program over a couple of just over 2 years. But it worked. That was what we had to do, and we had to go and find them and connect with the communities and use the networks that Stacey and Jazz had, and get people to apply. And it was really controversial at the time.
I can imagine.
We're talking about over 10 years ago, and people were saying to me things like, maybe they don't want to do yoga because they're not interested in it. I said, no, it's yoga for everybody. It's our failure as an organization. It's got nothing to do with that. And so it proved. So that's really where all that interest in diversity and inclusion comes from. And that sort of links into the health as well, because I don't know about you. Maybe you can share as well, Cleo. But when my classes, before I was running the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance charity, my classes were pretty much populated by sort of middle class type people who were aware of their health, quite active in doing things to promote their own health and well-being, and so I'm sort of in that gene pool of people who already got quite good self-care skills. Meanwhile, over here are the marginalized, the people living in poor housing with chronic long-term health conditions, lifestyle-related diseases, who have very low, what the NHS calls patient activation, low knowledge, confidence, and skills to manage their health, much less likely to think yoga would be relevant to their health. So you've got to have a different strategy to get them, and that's why Yoga and Healthcare Alliance was established by Heather Mason, who runs the Minded Institute yoga therapy training, and she got me on board right from the beginning. And now I run the charity. It's become a charity. I run that. We have a great board of directors, including Heather, and we set it up to do certain things to enable us to reach those patients in the NHS who are ill and getting iller due to lifestyle choices, unhealthy behaviors, lack of support, lack of being reached by yoga and other things, and to connect with them and try and make a big difference to their lives.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because so what I was saying before, well, first of all, the yoga that I practiced when I did try to go out into the community was mainly in the city centre of Birmingham. So yeah, I would say predominantly white, predominantly middle class. I did feel a bit like an oddball, but I loved yoga, so I didn't care. I just carried on. But when I started to think about learning and then even teaching, because when I took the teacher course, I wasn't really planning on teaching. I just wanted to know more. I wanted to really go deep. But then I really thought about the whole idea of, like saying, accessibility. So I'd say to people, do yoga, and you get those comments or remarks almost as if it's not for everybody. Somebody said to me,
how many times have we heard, I can't do yoga, I'm too stiff?
Exactly.
It's all stiff people.
Exactly. Or I've got a back pain, or my chest feels closed in. So I would say, oh, well, try this practice. I found that if I left the word yoga out of it and just describe something you could do, a stretch, opening the chest, opening the hips, that was better than saying, try this yoga pose or yoga asana. Absolutely. So I realised that it was what people think about yoga, but definitely that I worked for an organisation and volunteered for them, for people who'd suffered head injury, and said I could offer chair yoga. And at first, I mean, it was the same thing. Men didn't want to get involved. There were a few ladies. But once people saw and felt, and people saying, oh, I feel really good and awake and my body feels warm, just their reaction, more people would join in. And I knew that kind of said to me, it spoke to me so loudly, that told me, you've got to just give people the opportunity to try and then see how it goes. And another thing for me is I think there's definitely a barrier around price, because where I would practice in Birmingham, you could get, I think it's an average thing even now, because I'm always checking this, around, you can spend £60 a month for as much yoga as you like with different studios. That's the average price, which is really good, considering a class will cost you about £11 or £12, which, you know, it's a lot, I think, really, when you think about somebody who might want to join in and partake, but their local gym, you know, some of the gyms are like £10 a month, aren't they? So they'd probably opt for the gym. They're not involved because it's cheaper. And so the place that I've been teaching most recently, or that I've set up my classes, is in Newtown, and in the city area of Birmingham, an area that's predominantly people of colour. And it's a bit of a battle, but still, once people try it, it really opens them up. And I feel like if you can offer that in the right areas and be in those areas, it makes a lot of difference. And also the price.
You're absolutely right. I mean, that's a massive barrier if you're struggling. I always run equitable pricing structures. So what I currently do, and I know, you know, this is it's desperate really for yoga teachers, because I taught my first paid class was for adult education in 1998 or 1999, and so we're talking 25 years ago, and it was £20 an hour.
Wow.
It's still £20 an hour.
Wow.
So think about the loss of, through inflation and purchasing power and everything else. You know, we've absolutely been, as Karl Marx would say, the immiserization of yoga teachers. You know, we should be paid but we've never really taken the steps to establish ourselves as a true profession with, you know, proper regulation and standards. And a lot of people don't want that. So, but if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to charge the money. And then, you know, studios they've got to pay their bills and things, so they tend to not pay well, with great notable exceptions. You know, Yoga Matters run incredible community classes and pay their teachers well, and I'm sure other yoga studios do as well. So you know, that's all really important. But my model at the moment is a donation model.
Okay.
And the way I do it, I say it's a donation model. You know, I'm here and I would like to get paid, and I'm paying whatever it is, 30, £35, £40 for this hire of this hall. And I give all, when my students come in, they all find a little brown envelope on their mat. It's the ones you used to get in church to put your church donation in. And I'm actually teaching a community church hall just over the road. And I say, well, if you can afford it, this class is £10. If you're on a lower income, I recommended donation is £5, and if you're in receipt of universal credit, £2 to £3. But these are just guidelines, and you can absolutely give whatever you like, and it's anonymous anyway. And that's how I do it.
I love that. That's
and that's it removes that barrier of cost, because everybody can come up with £2 or £3. It's like, less than a coffin.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's really, I love that. It's just the idea that people don't feel, first of all, that they can't come through the door. That makes them feel that you can step through the door, and then when they get inside, they're not going to feel excluded in any way. Like you're
Yeah,
saying, accessible chairs, wheelchairs, everybody come in, and this class is for you regardless.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I know other yoga teachers will maybe say, "Oh, well, that's fine for you, but I couldn't afford to do that." Well, I can't afford to do that either. But it's just sort of, it's the best solution that I could find to that. And I wouldn't want to go down the route which I did in the past when I left my job as a BBC journalist and just working sort of freelance and trying to make a career out of yoga teaching and teaching 9 or 10 classes a week and bouncing from place to place. It's very, very draining, and
Yes.
also teaching in gyms and studios where it's very much a product. I call it it's the commoditization, the commercialization, and the turning yoga into a capitalist product, isn't it? In a consumer economy, as so far away from the authentic roots of yoga and what I want to present.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be constrained by being told, got to got to do a vinyasa class. And by the way, there's going to be booming music coming through the walls from the step class next door.
So no, I totally know what you're right. Goodness me. So is that why is that what set you on the path for YIHA? Is that the so
I
sorry,
think,
maybe say the difference between the Yoga in Healthcare Alliance and Yoga for Health. They're two separate
yeah, well, the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance is the organization and the charity.
right.
And we offer two programs. One is for NHS patients, and we call that the Yoga for Health program. You can see it in the background. It's
Yeah, I
got
was just
yoga number 4 health. Now, if you
yeah,
remember at the beginning, I said my first experience of yoga was at the Yoga for Health Foundation, but that
yeah,
was FOR in the middle. So I
mm,
named this program for patients as a kind of tribute to that organization which no longer exists. And the
right,
people behind it who passed on now, Howard Kent, Bill Feeney, and others. Some There are some quite elderly members who are still around who did all that great work, but they lost their building basically. They lost their residential centre to it was sold because they were only renting it, and it sort of their work collapsed and no one came along on a white horse with a lot of money and saved them. So yeah, so I'm kind of revived that work a little bit, paying tribute to it as well. So that's our Yoga for Health program. That's a 10-week social prescribing program. I'll say something about social prescribing in a second. And the other program you can see down there, which is a Yoga for NHS one. So that's the staff wellbeing program. So our idea is to support the NHS by providing yoga to the staff to help them manage stress, improve
mm,
their relaxation skills, and improve their well-being, and to support them beyond that. And there are 2 6-week courses for staff, and they're both accredited by the Royal College of GPs. So they count as CPD, continuing professional development, so they can log it on their professional record. And the Yoga for Health 10-week social prescribing program for patients. So those patients will often come through healthcare professionals, either might be recommended by a nurse or a physio or a GP or someone in a hospital setting. So the more yoga we can provide to staff and get them, oh wow, this yoga is great, the more likely they'll recommend it to patients. The more patients do it, they'll tell the healthcare professionals that they've done it and they're feeling better. So in this way, we are having two goes from either end of the NHS really to spread it. And I mentioned accreditation by the Royal College of GPs, so that's the staff program. The patient program is accredited by the Personalised Care Institute, and that was set up by NHS Improvement and the Royal College of GPs, and it is the awarding body for people who are offering qualifications in the arena of universal personalised care. So people watching this who are perhaps work in the health service will know exactly what that means. But under the current long-term plan, which will be replaced soon, but probably will still have this in it, the NHS is meant to be providing a universal personalised care to patients. So that means it's universal, everybody gets cared for, but that care is personalised, and the patients are supported and empowered, rather than, if we go back 30, 40, 50 years, you went to your doctor and the doctor said, here's your prescription, this is what you have to do. It was very much the doctor knows best. It was a power relationship. And now it's a much more equal relationship where the GPs are meant to talk to their patients and help them understand what their options are. And patients can now be referred to health coaches or to social prescribing link workers. So this all came about really because the NHS and others worked out that about 1 in 5 patients going to see a GP didn't really have a medical problem. They had more of a social problem. So they were feeling unwell because their housing was so terrible, or they've been unemployed, or they've got addiction issues, or debt issues, all these kind of things. And so for them, a more appropriate solution would be to talk to a social prescriber who can work with them to co-create a series of steps that they can take where they start to feel better, where they can become more active, where they can get more social connection going. Yeah, so the Yoga for Health social prescribing program for patients, the bit that makes it look different from a yoga class is that there's a little kind of 5-minute lecture at the beginning of the class on a very specific theme, which will include some. So I'm going to say this phrase, lifestyle medicine. So this is a very, very important concept. So your medicine is your lifestyle. So if you're going to drink too much, smoke too much, eat lots of ultra processed foods, lots of takeaways, lots of high fat foods, that's a lifestyle choice which is going to create ill health. And lifestyle medicine would be stopping smoking, reducing your alcohol intake, making sure you eat much more proportion of whole grains and vegetables and things like that. So there are lots of ways in which we can promote change in people's lifestyle, which will have a dramatic effect on their health. And yoga is very impactful on that. So the Yoga for Health program for patients, the NHS in West London gave the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance quite a chunky grant to create this program. So we're able to say the Yoga for Health program was commissioned by the NHS, is accredited by the NHS, and is evidence-based. And all those, and the teachers who run it have got an NHS accredited qualification. All those things give the healthcare staff the degree of confidence that they can recommend it to their patients. And then as they do it over that 10 weeks, we give them a lot of support. So they get that little talk. It can be done in a chair or on a mat, so it's very inclusive. And really the main thing that everybody learns with us is the breathing practices. So we're not really that focused on the posture work anyway. So we actually have a standardized protocol. We do the same physical practices every week, so that they can build their familiarity with how they're meant to move their body. And then that enables them to have, oh, now I don't need to focus so much on where my hands and feet go. I can focus more on mindfulness and on the breath work. And that's going to have the lasting benefit for them. And right at the end, we leave 20 minutes where at the end of the class, they come out of their relaxation, they sit up, they're reminded to do home practice, so that's really important. And then they all share their experiences of the class in a group setting. And that really helps them to hear what others have experienced. It helps to build group bonds. It's really what makes the class social prescribing. Normally in a yoga class, you come out of relaxation, people go home in a slightly comatose state to such an extent that they often can't remember what they did in the class. And there isn't that strong social connection that we have.
Yeah, no, and that's one of the things as well, the idea that everybody kind of Some people go in the middle of the relaxation, the shavasana, they've just gone, and then you're kind of left drifting out. Sometimes you really want to talk to somebody and just, like you say, have that chat about how you feel and how you've enjoyed the class. Sometimes the teacher's too busy, so you just kind of go. But there was always that feeling for me of, I'd really love to just sit down and have a cup of tea with somebody and have a chat.
Yeah.
So that sounds amazing. I love that.
Yeah, and we find that it's really it's an opportunity for social connection, but it's also a real opportunity to learn, because
Mm-hmm.
if you've had an experience, then you hear somebody else saying they've had a similar experience or they had a different experience. It helps to shape your own understanding of what occurred for you. So it
Mm-hmm.
embeds their knowledge. It also builds through that social connection. It builds an attitude within them where they want to keep in touch with each other. So we set them up with a WhatsApp group or a private Facebook page. They'll often go off and have a coffee together after class and things like that. So it really builds a lot of community. And we really, we train our teachers, and then really we want them to deliver it in their local community.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's amazing. So, how would, and this is the thing, so how I found out about the organisation was somebody told me, and I wrote it down. I went to the website and then, made the contact and asked about how, as a yoga teacher, I can be part of Yoga for Health or
Mm.
teach yoga through Yoga for Health. So, if there are yoga teachers listening today, what would be the first steps? I'm going to make notes here, so I'll put these in the show notes as well for people.
Okay,
What would
fantastic.
be the first thing that they should do?
Yeah, so they pretty much can get in contact with me via the website. So I also one of my to be honest, I pretty much run the charity on my own.
I was going to say, it seems like,
Um, I am the volunteer who does that. So I sort of administer all these programs, and then we run two trainings a year, usually sort of March and October. So you're never that far away from one. Um, what we're really looking for is a yoga teacher who is interested in our mission, and our mission is to integrate yoga into healthcare, is
mm-hmm,
interested in reaching um, people who might not normally come to a yoga class. So
yeah,
having more social impact. So it's yoga with a social purpose, and that's very important to me. I'm a member of a group, the Yoga Community Network. I might have gotten the name a bit wrong, and I'll get into trouble with Davy Jones down in Brighton, who's been running the Brighton Yoga Festival with others for decades, and is an incredible person. And so he manages this network. So there are lots of people around the country either running studios or out community outreach programs through yoga. Uh,
mm-hmm,
and one of the things the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance charity does is we act as the secretariat for the all-party parliamentary group on yoga in society. So we hold meetings at Westminster where MPs and peers can come along and hear from expert teachers and researchers and people who've experienced life-changing. And this is sort of focusing on areas where yoga could really have a positive impact on society and actually save a lot of money. So that APPG doesn't just focus on healthcare, it also focuses on prisons, education, and the workplace. So, for instance, the last couple of meetings, we had one um, involving the uh, Prisons Phoenix Trust, PPT, and also
mm-hmm,
the Prisons Yoga Project, and academics in criminology talking about yoga's role in rehabilitation. That's very much in the news at the moment with all the prison overcrowding. And they brought along some people who had spent time inside and have found that the yoga had given them a lot of confidence and resources and techniques to manage their stress and anger and things like that.
yeah,
And then the one previous to that was about teen mental health, and all the things being done in schools, uh, also in primary schools, but this was primarily focusing on secondary schools. So, and then we've also had meetings where we focused on NHS patients and staff. So there's that going on. So people who want to, yoga teachers, we're looking for yoga teachers who are interested in that social purpose, have also kind of in their classes, that's what they've been doing. They're very willing to modify practice. They're not trying to drill people through a sequence, but they're more about meeting individual needs and adaptations. We're not super picky. When we first started, we used to say you need a 500-hour yoga qualification, but now we're a bit more flexible because there are lots of people out there who've done some fantastic continuing professional development. They might have started off with a 200-hour yoga qualification, and then they've done this and they've done that, and they've been teaching for 5 years, and they're working in the community. And also, we get about a third of the people on that training are yoga teachers, and they work in the NHS. So, that is really interesting for yoga teachers who've not been in that environment where the other people on the course are GPs and nurses and physios and things like that. It gives it quite a different feel. And then the course itself is about 30 hours of pre-course learning, which is all done online. It's doing the 10 classes of the protocol and watching a few lectures, reading the book. Unfortunately, Heather and I wrote the book Yoga on Prescription to be the course textbook for the training as well. So that is required reading. And then we have four 9 to 5, 30 days on Zoom. And then after that, you do a multiple choice exam, which takes about an hour. And then you arrange, and with 3 other members of the course, so groups of 4, you take it in turns to teach a shortened version of the class, which is observed by an assessor who makes notes and gathers evidence of learning and things, and that provides the evidence base for quality assurance, accreditation, and all those other things.
It's amazing. Such a brilliant idea, and it feels so. I suppose the reason why it is well thought out is because it is based on experience, like you say, and what's actually going on, rather than having this idea of this is what it is in this box and this is what you do. It's actually about the people and how people benefit from it. It sounds. I'm really excited, so I'm definitely going to be doing that.
It's incredible. I should say I should always take every opportunity to say that's all the things. What the course isn't is you don't do the course and then bowl up at your GP surgery and say, I've got this qualification, employ me as a yoga teacher. So the NHS does not have the funds to fund patients to do our course. That is an aspiration. I think it will come one day, because the Westminster, that initial 300 patients who did the course, when the West London Clinical Commissioning Group of the NHS gave us the money to create the programme, they also paid for Westminster University to study the 300 patients who we put through the programme over about 14 months. And they took baseline data. They took data from those patients at the end of 10 weeks, and they followed them up 3 months later. And that is 2 published academic papers, which provide a fantastic evidence base that our programme works. One of the surprising things in that Westminster study is that the NHS patients who came on our 10-week programme, they had their waist measured at the beginning and the end, and they lost 14 centimetres off their waist. But we didn't talk about diet and lifestyle. So how yoga just builds that awareness of your body. It sort of pushes you towards health and mindfulness. And these obviously naturally led to changes in eating behaviour. And the regular home practice they were doing may have played a part as well. We don't really know exactly, but they lost a lot of weight, which is surprising. But the NHS love that, because obesity is such a difficult issue to address.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And like you say, when people say, oh, well, I have had a lot of people say, does it help you to lose weight? And the one thing I suppose I noticed right at the beginning when I started practicing is it does make you more aware of how much water you're drinking. and the water that you gain from eating more vegetables and fruits and things, and the fact that you do feel. One of the things I noticed, and I'll never forget, because it was such a eye opener. Nobody said it to me. I just felt it. That eating, I know things like your pizzas and your chips, there's no nutritional value in those foods, but going through a period, let's say of 3 or 4 days, where you're eating more vegetables and you're more conscious of what you're eating and the water that you're drinking, and then practicing yoga, it's almost like your body feels so much different. So you can tell, it's just something you can do for yourself. You will know the difference of what you're eating, what's benefiting you, because you feel it when you're practicing yoga, and I suppose just in day-to-day life. But
and we're very keen on body positive yoga and concept of healthy weight, and not perpetuating any of those stereotypical ideas about what a yoga body looks like, which is why it's quite a comfortable space for us to occupy, because we just know that this is happening in the background, and we don't really in any overt way. Sometimes it comes up in that circle discussion. People might volunteer and say, oh, well, I've been eating more healthily since I've been doing this course. So it might come up there, but it's not sort of overtly addressed. We just know that yoga is a powerful tool for health and well-being, and it works on so many different levels, including affecting your choices that you make in terms of diet.
Yeah, it is. It's just really powerful. And so in order, because I read on the website as well that once you take the course, if you're a yoga teacher and you take the course, one of the things you are shown or taught to do is how to go out into your community and kind of promote or connect with your local GP or medical centre. Is that right? Have I read
Exactly. So I suppose the other thing to say is, when every yoga teacher does this course, it's not like, you might do another course like yoga for pregnancy or yoga for whatever, and you do the course and then here's your certificate, goodbye. So with this one, it's you complete the course and you join our community, which is now over 550 yoga for health teachers, and I remain in contact with that community. We have quarterly meetings on Zoom, which are recorded for people who can't attend in person. We have, everybody has access to a shared storage space where we have all the documentation for running courses, so that when it's updated, you've always got access to the latest documentation. We're always creating and providing new resources for patients to practice with. A big, as you just indicated, a big part about becoming a yoga for health teacher is almost becoming a community champion as well. And you will become known in your area. You are the yoga teacher who is running NHS accredited courses, and so you build a relationship with your local social prescriber and health coach and GPs who are sympathetic to yoga, of which there are many. So one of the things I've created in the last few months is like a case study sheet to show how it works with my local GP surgery. That I have a very good partnership arrangement with, which you build up over a period of time. So now when I'm running a course, I'm running one starts in a couple of weeks' time, because we are sitting on the cusp of January 2025. If you're watching later, just imagine that timing. January is a great time to start things like this, isn't it? So I have somebody in that surgery who runs their IT system, who will send out a text message to all the patients, 30 at a time, who are registered as pre-diabetic. Now, patients who are pre-diabetic are people who are at elevated risk of developing, obviously, type 2 diabetes, but also cardiovascular disease. They will often be moving towards that obese category, and maybe there already. They've got a lot of health problems coming at them down the road unless they make some lifestyle change. So as we are an early intervention and prevention program, it's a good group of patients to target. So they'll send out 30 at a time. They'll receive a text on their phone saying, there's a yoga for health course that may support your health. If you're interested, here's the contact details, which is my contact details because I'm the teacher. And then for every 30 texts, 2, 3, or 4 patients will get in contact and will register. And we'll do that in the next 2 weeks, right up to week 1. And I will have a full course of 20 or 25 patients. So that is the surgery actively, that's called active signposting. So they're actively signposting their patients to the course. So when you've got that kind of partnership in place, it makes it easy to run courses, but it does take some work, and you have to be prepared if you come on the course to kind of put in some legwork to get things going. Unless you're lucky and you're training in an area where there's already a yoga for health teacher who's done all that work for you, in which case just piggyback on them.
Absolutely. I know that sounds fantastic. I did look at the list for Birmingham. I think there's one other teacher who's in Solihull. So yeah, I was kind of thinking, and
Plenty of scope there.
yeah, exactly. And then there's a couple of yoga teachers who, one lady was saying that she works with somebody who's done the course, but she works for them. So that person must have, hired teachers to teach as well. But yeah, no, it's brilliant.
And Claire, you might be interested that. So when Heather set up Yoga and Healthcare Alliance, and I began running these programs and training up the teachers, I was also at the same time applying for lots of grants, thinking that the charity would bring in a lot of money and then disperse it to teachers to deliver courses. But in fact, the way that grant funding works is very decentralized. So one of the things we cover on the course is helping you understand where your sources of funding will come from and how to apply for them. So you can always fall back on that donation model that I talked about earlier, but you might also, particularly if you're working in high priority areas, which tend to be areas of that are high on the deprivation index and things like that, where there's more funds available to apply for, because we can show that we'll have a meaningful impact on that. You would apply for funding, and that would either cover the whole cost, in which case it's free to the service users, the patients, or it might be very reduced in price. So that really hasn't happened in terms of me getting the money, but it did happen a bit. So in the autumn, we got £15,000 from Sport England, and we are delivering Yoga for Health to around 250 patients in areas of higher deprivation in Manchester and Greater Manchester. And so we've got 8 courses starting this January, and we'll be monitoring that. And that's been interesting because we've had to make, even I've been used to making connections with a local GP surgery. Now we've been making connections with citywide authorities responsible for health and physical activity and social care, and they've all got involved in sending patients to those programs. So I think this will become more common going forwards. When Wes Streeting announced his review, what should be the purpose of the NHS, and he's been saying again and again on the campaign trail and now they're in government, that this government wants to focus the NHS a lot more on early intervention and prevention. Because it almost doesn't need saying, but if you've got an aging population like us, if you've got an obesity crisis, if you've got growing waiting lists in hospitals, what you've got is greater and greater demand for health services with a budget that is constrained, and that is a recipe just for overload and breakdown. So in order to make the National Health Service sustainable, it's very important to tackle these lifestyle causes of disease. And lifestyle is the biggest cause of death. It's the leading cause of death in the world, and in every country of the world. So, it is heart attack and stroke and many forms of cancer. The risk is raised through lifestyle choices. Obvious example would be smoking, where over 90% of people who develop lung cancer are smokers. So if you can change the lifestyle, you can reduce that demand on publicly funded healthcare services, you can help the NHS. And that's one of the things we say to the teachers, we say it to the patients, we say, you're here for your own health primarily, but you're also here as part of this national mission that the Yoga and Healthcare Alliance has to support our amazing NHS and people who work in it, and to help them be able to deal with those pressures by enabling and supporting that behaviour change.
Yeah, that is incredible. It's such an amazing mission. But as you're speaking, it's the thing that it's so possible. It's not something that feels, well, that's so far ahead or out of reach. That just makes so much sense, and it's possible. In those steps to get all the yoga, because there's so many yoga teachers all across the country. I know people who have trained and then kind of put it on the back burner as well. So having this idea that really yoga, I mean, people say it, but actually in practice, yoga is for everybody. And that just feels like the right direction. It's amazing. It really is.
Yeah. And when we set out, we Heather, initially we called meetings, and because we didn't want to appear like we were trying to monopolize yoga and healthcare, because we knew there are many yoga teachers done incredible pioneering work. My own yoga teacher, Anne Weston, who trained me in Watford about back in 1995 to 99, she had been working in hospices and with NHS patients with cancer for years, decades. She'd probably been doing that for 40 years. So there were individual yoga teachers who had made inroads and gained the trust of the NHS. But generally, when we spoke to NHS professionals, they would say, particularly GPs, who they can't be expected to have a detailed knowledge of what yoga is taking place in their community. They said, well, we can't really recommend it to our patients because we've no idea what their experience will be. We've no idea what the qualifications of the teacher are. We could send, someone in their 70s to an Ashtanga yoga class, and they might get broken in half there because it's the wrong, inappropriate yoga, which is why they tended to favour Pilates, because that's a much more predictable experience focused on lower back care and things like that. So that is why we said, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to develop evidence-based standardized protocols. We're going to get them commissioned and accredited by the NHS, and then we've removed that barrier. So, and because the teaching qualification that our teachers do is a personalised care institute, and it says on their website, NHS commissioners are expected to prioritise PCI qualification holders when commissioning services in the individual personalised care that patients are receiving. So we're right there. It's been a long, hard slog, but we're right there, and we've created this pathway using social prescribing where yoga can thrive and grow and make a big impact on society. And I guess that's why I still do this job, even though I haven't been paid for 2 years, because our charity pretty much ran out of money. So if anyone's watching this who is friends with Chris Martin, who I've written to, I went to a Sting concert in the summer and held up a placard saying, Sting, Yoga and Healthcare, we need your help, and put it on social media, hoping that he might reach out because of his incredible charitable work and interest in yoga. So we're still looking for that backing.
Yeah, too. Well, it's the passion and more people knowing about it and kind of putting it out there, because I would just say it's one of the, as I said, I kind of thought to myself, how comes I didn't know? And this is just so amazing. What an amazing idea, because I think definitely for myself and other teachers that I know, it's this idea, well, it's for everybody, it is actually for everybody. So why isn't there something? And then, as I said, to find this out about this course, it's just like, this is the path. This is the one. I'm going to put all this information and the links to the website and the books in the show notes so that people can, look into it, sign up for the course, and just learn a bit more to be able to offer that in their area. And it doesn't matter really, does it, if you've got, I don't know, a concentration of teachers in a particular area, that shouldn't matter, should it really?
No, absolutely not. I mean, if you think about when I talked to my surgery and said, well, we've got 1,500 patients who are registered as pre-diabetic. I mean, that's a lot of patients to work through. And then you might target a different group of patients. You know, you could target people who are, got a different kind of lifestyle choice problem that's affecting their health. So,
Yeah. And there's all sorts of areas, like you say. So even I was sitting here thinking, gosh, well, there's menopause. There are people with brain injury. A lot of people with brain injury don't necessarily go to the centres or the charities that are set up for them, but may consider things like that. Yeah, absolutely. Oh,
one thing worth sort of which people listening worth drawing to their attention. So you're probably aware you've got yoga teachers here, and then the yoga therapy profession here. And yoga therapy profession, I mean, Heather's course, I think, is about 800 hours or 900 hours, might be even longer now. I think you can go right up to master's level.
Yeah.
So what we've done, which I could see would be very exciting and appealing to yoga teachers, is we've provided this opportunity to teach NHS patients and be involved in teaching yoga in healthcare setting and partnering up with health organisations. But you're a general yoga teacher. So, but you're not a yoga therapist. So you do our qualification doesn't make you a yoga therapist. So there's a professional boundary there, and with the yoga teaching side of it. But what we found is they're very, very compatible. So a lot of people who do our training think because just to clarify that, so because we're teaching a group class of say 20 or 25. You can have a range of people there. You can have people there for mental health reasons, stress and anxiety, or you might have people there because of cardiovascular risk or type 2 diabetes risk, or they might be there because they're socially isolated. And those are our main criteria for people coming into the program. But what you don't have are people who are so ill that they would really require one-to-one or small group class. And that's more the domain of yoga therapy. So a lot of our teachers have then gone on and trained as yoga therapists, and quite a lot of yoga therapists have thought, I quite fancy teaching, a bit higher up the river, which is flowing down to my clients, and teaching these group classes. So it's worked out to be very compatible.
Fantastic. So it's really quite wide open to cover all areas, especially with the like you're saying, it again being accessible. So for some people it might be because they don't feel like they can go into, maybe it's a shyness, maybe it's the idea of feeling embarrassed about going into that environment. But the one-to-one classes, so I've done a few one-to-ones, and also especially around sleep, and sleep seems to be such a big area in the last few years. Oh, it feels to me, I don't know if that's the case, but since COVID or after COVID, that people are just accepting that 3-4 hours of sleep a night is the norm. They actually think it's normal and it's okay, not realising the impact on other areas in their life. So it's like one area that I kind of draw people into yoga as well. That sounds amazing. It really does, and I can't wait for this to go out and for people to see what people's reaction are, and hopefully, is there a maximum amount of spaces for March? Because that's the next one.
Yes, yeah, we tend to. I mean, we've run courses with as few as 16, 18. I mean, we always run the course. We'll run the course whatever, and then we cap it at 32.
Oh, okay.
But it's rarely that many.
Oh, well, hopefully this March it will be 32. You might have a waiting list.
Yeah.
It'll be definitely my mission to put it out there. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I feel like I'll close this down and then I'll think, oh, I forgot to ask this question, but I've run through. But yeah, it's been amazing. It really has opened up my mind to the possibilities, and I'm sure it's going to have that impact on many yoga teachers and people who've probably been thinking about yoga to look out for at their GP practice or medical centres to look at this as well. Yeah.
And I mean, I always need to include this bit really. Anyone who gets in touch, one of my tips is, so the training's not until March. So I always say to people, as soon as they've registered an interested course, I say, begin to make your connections now, or because some people say, oh, I've invested a lot in my training and I want to know whether I'm going to make at least the cost of the course fees back, because the course fees are, if you're paying full price, so that's 775 plus a £40 assessment fee for the class observation. But we do offer unlimited bursaries for people on lower incomes, and often yoga teachers will fall into that, and that gets £250 off. And then we also offer a scholarship scheme through Fierce Calm, which is where we offer 100% scholarships to people of colour, and any other underrepresented groups in our community. So, from what I said early on in the my interest in diversity and inclusion, there was no way I was going to build this community of yoga for health teachers and turn around and find they're all white.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So we always have a very mixed heritage, a very diverse course group. That's really important.
Yeah, that's amazing. That really is. So if somebody was interested, and again, if they felt like the price was the barrier, they could still apply, go to the website, and email you.
First step is really still to me, and I'll send out a sort of pre-course information and sets out the fees, and then they can request the bursary form if they want to apply for that £250 off. And then I mentioned the scholarship scheme, and then Lee Watson at Fierce Calm, he's an incredible guy. He's actually over in Ukraine at the moment, training yoga teachers to deal with the aftermath of conflicts, injuries, and things like that. And we've offered free places to his teachers based in Ukraine on this training as well, because he's taken our resources, our breathing videos, and the yoga of health protocol into that setting, and is using it there, which is really good. You should interview him sometime. He's an incredible person, but he has a very good Instagram following, so we do it through him. So he'll put something out, he puts something out, but I get the applications sent to me for the scholarship places.
Right.
So it all ends up back at me one way or another.
Okay, so contact you for the applications for the scholarship and also for the bursary.
Yeah, and for the sort of the bare bones, all the pre-course information really, which is that is a part of, is all comes from me via an email. So, yeah.
Perfect. So I'm going to put all that information, as I said, in the show notes for anybody who's watching, listening, wants some more information, and wants to get started in March.
Yes, and if you just if you include that my email, the contact yogaforhealth@gmail.com one, that's the one to get all this information sent to them directly.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us on this enlightening episode of Serenity Speaks, Conversations on Wellness. And a huge thank you to Paul Fox for sharing his incredible journey and making yoga accessible to all, and for shedding light on the transformative social prescribing and how yoga can impact you, your family, your loved ones, and your community. If you'd like to learn more about Paul's work or get involved, check out the links in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to Serenity Speaks for more inspiring conversations on wellness. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone who might benefit from it and leave us a review. It helps us reach more listeners just like you. So until next time, take care of yourself and stay on your path to serenity. See you next week.